Walk to Moons, Chapter 35, The Plan. All day long, we ate up the road through Montana. I hadn't looked so far on the map, but it was all mountains. We started in the foothills of the Rockies as we left Yellowstone, and all day we climbed up and down. Sometimes the road snaked along the side of a cliff, and the only thing between us and the sharp drop was a piddly railing. Often, as we sailed around a bend, we came face to face with a camping trailer swinging its wide body around the curve. "These roads are a dinger," Gramps said, but he was like a little kid riding a hobby horse. "Giddy up, let's get a move on," he said, encouraging the car up a hill. "Hee-yah," he said as we swept down the other side. I felt as if I was torn in two pieces. Half of me was oogling the scenery. I had to admit it was as pretty as, or maybe even prettier than By Banks. Trees and rocks and mountains, rivers and flowers, deer and moose and rabbits. It was an amazing country, an enormous country. But the other half of me was a quivering pile of jelly. I could see our car bursting through the railing and plunging down the cliff. As we approached each curve, I could see us smashing straight on into a truck or a camper. Every time I saw a bus, I watched it sway. I watched its tires spin dangerously close to the gravel at the road's edge. I watched it plunge on, eating up the road, defying those curves. Graham sat quietly with her hands folded on her lap. I thought she might be asleep, especially after staying awake all night, but she didn't. She wanted to hear about Peebee. So all day long, I took in the scenery, and as I imagined us in 1,000 accidents, and as I prayed underneath it all to any tree whizzing by, I talked about Peebee. I wanted to tell it all today. I wanted to finish it. On the day after Mr. Berkway appeared at Phoebe's house and told us about Mr. Cadaver, Phoebe and I put our plan in motion. We were going to track down Sergeant Bickle's son, and according to Phoebe, discover the whereabouts of Phoebe's mother. I wasn't positive that Sergeant Bickle's son was a lunatic, but I wasn't convinced he would lead us to Phoebe's mother. But enough of Phoebe's tales had been transplanted into my brain so that I was caught up in the plan. Like Phoebe, I was ready to take some action. We could hardly sit still all day at school. Phoebe especially was fired up. She was worried, too. She was afraid we might not discover her mother alive, and I was beginning to share that fear. At school, everyone was still buzzing about the journal readings. Everyone wanted to know who had written about the murder. Alex avoided Mary Lou because of what she had said about his being a pink jerk, and Mary Lou avoided Beth Ann because of what Beth Ann had written about the chicken kisses. Megan and Christy taunted Beth Ann with, "Did you really tell Mary Lou that kisses taste like chicken? Did she really believe you?" And they taunted me with, "Do you really kiss trees? Don't you know you're supposed to kiss boys?" In English class, everyone badgered Mr. Berkway to finish reading the journal entry that he had begun yesterday, the one about Mrs. Corpse and the body. But Mr. Berkway did not read any more journals. Instead, he apologized for hurting people's feelings by reading their private thoughts aloud, and he sent us to the library. There, Ben trailed me. If I looked at the fiction section, he was right beside me. If I moved over to examine the magazines, he was flipping through one as well. Once his face made contact with my shoulder. He was definitely trying to plant a kiss on me. I knew he was, but there was nothing I could do about it. I could not help it that whenever he aimed his mouth in my direction, my body was already moving away. I needed a little warning. I tried remaining completely still for several consecutive minutes, and during those minutes I detected Ben leaning slightly towards me several times. Each time, however, he drew back, as if someone were controlling him by an invisible thread. Across the library, Beth Ann called, "Sal, there's a spider. Sal, kill it!" When the final bell rang, Phoebe and I were out of school like a shot. At Phoebe's house, we examined the telephone directory. "We've got to hurry," Phoebe said, "before Prudence or my father comes home." There were 6 Bickles listed in the directory, and we took turns calling. Each time, we asked for Sergeant Bickle. The first 2 people said we must have the wrong number. The 3rd number we dialed was busy, and the 4th, no answer. The 5th was answered by a crotchety woman who said, "I don't know any sergeants." The 6th number was answered by an elderly man who must have been lonely because he talked on and on about once knowing a Sergeant Freeman in the war. But that was back in 1944. And he also knew a Sergeant Bones and a Sergeant Dowdy, but he did not know a Sergeant Bickle. "What are we gonna do?" Phoebe wailed. "Prudence will be home any minute, and we still don't know which is the right Bickle." Well, the busy number was still busy, and the previously unanswered one rang and rang. And just as Phoebe was about to hang up, she heard a voice. "Hello," she said. "May I speak with Sergeant Bickle, please?" There was a pause as she listened. "Oh, he's still at work." Phoebe was jumping up and down. "Thank you," she said, trying to make her voice serious. "I'll call later." No message. Thank you." "Yes," she said when she hung up. "Yes, yes, yes." And she was hugging me half to death. "You'll have to do the phase 2 tonight." That night, while my father was at Margaret's, I phoned the Bickles. I prayed that Sergeant Bickle wouldn't answer, but I was prepared to disguise my voice in case he did. The phone rang and rang. I hung up. I rehearsed my voice and what I would say. I tried again. On the 7th ring, the phone was answered. It was Sergeant Bickle. "My name is Susan Longfellow," I said. "I'm a friend of your son's. I was wondering if I might speak with him." I prayed and prayed. He only had one son. "He isn't here," Sergeant Bickle said. "Would you like to leave a message?" "Do you know when he'll be home?" There was a pause. "How did you say you know my son?" This made me nervous. How do I know your son?" "Well, that's a long story. I basically, the way I know him is, actually, this is a little embarrassing to admit. My hands were sweating so much I could hardly hang on to the phone. The library. Yes, I know him from the library. He loaned me a book, and I've lost the book." "Maybe you should explain all this to him," Sergeant Bickle said. "Yes, maybe I should do that." "I wonder why he gave you this phone number," he said. "I wonder why he didn't give you his number at school." "At school? Actually, the thing is, I think he did give me that number too, but I've lost it." "Well, you sure lose a lot of things," he said. "Would you like his number at school?" "Yes," I said. "Or better yet, maybe you could give me his address and I'll just send him the book." "I thought you said you lost the book." "Actually, yes, but I'm hoping to find it," I said. "I see," he said. "Just a minute." And there was a muffled pause as he put his hand over the receiver and called, "Honey, where's Mike's address?" "Mike! Brilliant! A name!" I felt like the chief inspector. I felt like I had just discovered the most important clue in the criminal investigation of the century. To top it off, Sergeant Bickle gave me Mike's address. I was sorely tempted to end the conversation by informing Sergeant Bickle that his son was a potential lunatic, but I refrained. I thanked him and immediately phoned Phoebe. "You're brilliant," she said. "Tomorrow we'll nail Mike the lunatic."